this is a tough place to start talking from. You all just had a great meal, and then we had wonderful dessert, and hopefully by the time I'm done talking, everybody won't be sleeping, because that's usually what you want to do after you have a meal like that. It's going to be tough to keep everyone's attention. And then Barbara does this introduction, and she talks about swimming pools and golf courses and things that companies are supposed to do. And I'm sitting here, and a couple of our employees are here, and they're looking at me like, well, what's up with PGT? You know, we have a golf league. It's not quite like having 2 golf courses. Some of us like to swim. It's not quite like having a swimming pool. So I think we've got some work to do. But you know, thanks for inviting us here. We are part of the community. We've been here for a long time. And it's always a lot of fun to kind of stand up and talk about what we do as a company. People back at work were laughing today, and they're saying, okay, I know you're going to go talk about PGT today. You're going to talk about the history of PGT. How hard is that for you to do? And I think the hard part sometimes is keeping it short enough and not putting people to sleep, because this is what we've lived for the last 30-some years. And we absolutely love what we do. And you know, I can stand here and tell you that not every one of those 30-some years has been a fantastic year, but that doesn't change the fact that we love what we do. We love the people that we work with. We love the people that work with us. We love our customers. It's just kind of the nature of what we are as a company. So when you look back, 1980, you know, it says humble beginnings there. That really isn't too accurate, because you see the name PGT on there. We were Vinyl Tech back in 1980, and we had a dually pickup truck with a Wells cargo trailer. Nothing quite as elaborate as a truck like that, but that's what we started out with. And as we went forward, 6 James Street. Anybody know where that is? You know where yeah, okay. 6 James Street. There used to be a place called Jansen Insulation, and they were in the front of the building. We were in that little corner in the back. I think it was actually about 3,000 square feet. And the first day we walked in, which was November, it's easy to remember, it was the day after Thanksgiving. So go back and look at 1980, it was the day after Thanksgiving. We walked in, and our first job was to start building tables so we could actually produce product. Now, imagine this, I'm the kid from Ohio that's just moved to Florida, literally got there like on Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving. We unload our stuff. So my wife's stuck in the little place we're renting, and she's trying to put things away. We're going down to start working. We're going to build tables so that we can start producing product. And I've never seen this product that we're going to produce. Now, I knew what it looked like, because, you know, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but we literally designed this product. Paul and I were sitting in a place, we actually were following the kids around, his kids, and they were playing softball in North Carolina. And we sat down at a table and we talked about a vertical floor track, a porch enclosure product. So I had that vision of what that was, and we're sketching out on a napkin how to make the latches work. So the story about starting this company on a bar napkin really is true. We actually sketched out how the latches should work on a napkin, and we kept that napkin with us because we had to have people make some injection molded parts. So that was really kind of the history of how we started there. We talked about a lot of things. We looked at a factory in Ohio, and we talked about making wheelbarrow handles. And what we knew is we wanted to be involved in some type of manufacturing. It was in Paul's blood, it was a little bit in my blood, with the job that I was doing right then. We wanted to be involved in manufacturing. And Venice, and this area, and the porch enclosure product was the product we knew best. So that's really what got us going. Before you can really talk about how we got where we are today, though, I think understanding what we stand for is so critically important. And we've talked about it since day one, that integrity is really the thing that drives everything. At the end of the day, when you leave, it doesn't matter what you've amassed, what your fortune is, they're probably not going to stick it. There's probably somebody that has it buried with them in their coffin just because they're really greedy, but you're not going to take it with you. You're going to leave it, and the only thing that you're taking with you is your integrity. And people are going to talk about what you stood for, what you did, what you said, and if you did what you said you were going to do. So all that other stuff, you know, it's just kind of gets you from here to there, but it's really not the important stuff. And we spent really a lot of time talking about what we believed in and why those things were so important to us. Family. You know, the goal at first, and you know, I'll talk about Paul quite a bit as we go through this, especially in the beginning part, because Paul and I were talking, when we were talking about what we're going to do as a company and what the goals were as a company, we never had a goal of being this really big manufacturer. We never had a goal that we were going to employ 100 people or 200 people. Or we really didn't talk a lot about the market, the large market that we were going to serve. We talked about making sure that we had a company that took care of our families, that took care of the families of the employees that worked for us, that everybody made a decent living, and then when they went home at the end of the day, there was something they could be proud of. And they could sit there and say, okay, you know, this is a family-oriented business, and this is what's going to drive us going forward. So the family part has always been there, and the family's gotten bigger. You know, we understand now when we say family, it doesn't mean the same thing it did back in 1980. Family becomes the community. You know, it becomes the larger customer base. You know, those families are important. You know, it was really cool. Last week we were doing a customer event in the Keys, and we had a couple hundred customers there, and their families were there. And so, you know, you get to know that extended family, and you realize that, you know, people depend on us for their living, we depend on them for our living, and so it's that interdependency that's so important. And that's that big family that we're all part of. Customer focus. When we interviewed people back in 1980 and 81, we weren't very sophisticated. So our question in the interview process was, can you make sure you love our customers, regardless of what they do? And if you couldn't answer that question positively, you weren't going to get hired. And it wasn't about all the skills you had, and all the schooling you had, and all the degrees behind your name. It was, how well can you take care of our customer? Now, our customer is going to ask you for things that are completely and totally ridiculous. How well can you take care of that customer? How are you going to answer that customer? You know, how are you going to look them in the eye and say, you know, there's things that we don't do. We don't do tires. We got calls at that time. You guys do vinyl tops on cars, vinyl tech, right? You do vinyl tops on cars. You know, you didn't laugh at the customer and hang up on him. You gave him an explanation. And it's amazing that we ended up selling a lot of those, do you do vinyl tops on cars, customers, a set of porch enclosure products because of the way we took care of our customers. So that was really critical to us. Quality and community. You know, community kind of falls into those family values. I don't think anyone can build a really strong company without talking and really ingraining that quality and making sure that the product you make is better than everybody else's product, but not just the product. For us, the quality isn't just the product that goes out, it's how we take care of the customer. If the quality care that we give our customer is not better than everybody else, then we're not better than everybody else. People can match your product, but they can't necessarily match the way you care. So that becomes really important. So that was the core values. Those things were there already back in 1980. So 1982, and massive growth. We moved to the end of James Street, 248 James Street. Wasn't the entire building. If you guys remember, Lico was back there making, they were making newspaper boxes for USA Today at the time, had a great little business going, and they built an addition to their building, and they needed the back end of it, so we had the front end of it. So we were growing, and things were going well, and you know, those core values that we were talking about were continuing to bring in additional sales, and you know, the market was going okay, because by this time, you know, 1980, I think interest rates were 18%, 19%. And they had dropped way down by 1982, man. Things were easy then, right? So we could just continue to grow. And then 1984, we built our building on Center Court, right there on the corner of Center Court. And we kept growing. We introduced a glass window. That's when we started talking a little bit about PGT and the progressive glass technology. And that's, you know, that's how PGT got started. And we started that because we looked at our customer, we talked to our customer, and we said, what's the thing that you need? And they said, well, you know, we realize you don't do this, but if we're going to close in a screen porch, we're either going to close it in with your product or we're going to close it in with glass windows. And nobody ships us glass windows on time. At the time, we had 3 to 5 day lead time, and we had never back ordered a product. Just, again, you tell people you're going to deliver something on time, you deliver it. That's what you said you're going to do. So we had never shipped a product late or delivered or not delivered a product. We rented a plane a couple times and flew product to Daytona Beach or to Jacksonville to get it there. But that's how strongly we believe that when you tell a customer you're going to do something for them, you do it. So our customers were saying, well, we can't get glass windows on time, so you guys need to handle a glass window. We started distributing a glass window. And we found out that they would tell us they're going to deliver it to us on Tuesday, and Wednesday it wouldn't be there, and Thursday it wouldn't be there, and we'd go to their dock and be sitting there, and they'd say, well, it's on its way over there, and we'd look at the windows, set them on their dock. They weren't even being shipped yet, so we started manufacturing our own product. And then, of course, with the growth in the market, we'd opened up South Florida, Andrew hit. And Andrew wasn't a whole lot different than, it was different for us personally because it didn't affect our employees, but it wasn't a lot different for our customers because they got slammed by Andrew. And so when Andrew hit, we did the same thing that we typically would do for Charlie or anything like that. You know, number one, you care about your customers, and you know they're going to need a bunch of product, but the product wasn't the most important thing. We went to the Red Cross, we volunteered our trucks, we volunteered our facility and said, we'll be the collection point for the Red Cross. And so we'll get our trucks, as many as you need, you know, load them up with water, load them up with food, load them up with clothes, load them up with whatever you need to load them up with. We'll deliver them down to wherever you need them in Dade County, Broward County, Kendall, Homestead, you know, wherever it needed to be. And so we were running, you know, at the time, sometimes 3, 4, 5 trucks a day going to collection points, picking up stuff and running it down there. But then we also leveraged that into, we knew what that market needed. We saw the destruction that was down there. We understood that a lot of that destruction was caused because windows and doors were not made the way they should have been made. So our philosophy kind of kicked in. Our belief is, I know manufacturers in general don't like a lot of change because you got to retool everything. I don't know that we're a lot different than that, other than we look at the market and say, if the product or if the process or if the code makes it better for the consumer, if we can show you, if we can get the data to back it up and prove to you that the product's going to protect you better than the old product, or it's going to save you money, there's a benefit in it for the consumer, then we want to see that happen. And if it doesn't, we'll fight it tooth and nail, because there's no use to change it just to change it. We want to make sure it's better for the consumer. And that's been a consistent message that we've taken to the industry for a lot of years. And we're proud of that, and we think it works well, because we've, you know, the organization that writes almost all the standards for windows and doors, we chair that organization. We're currently vice chair of that organization, and we'll probably chair that organization again. So people understand what we stand for. And I think that's really important. When you talk about the integrity again and what you stand for, you don't compromise your standards just because it might bring you a buck. You stand for the right things, you prove that those are the right things, and then you continue doing those. So anyway, 1992 hits, Andrew comes through, our business almost doubles in 1 year. Now, the struggle for us was a lot of people were selling as many windows as they could into Dade County. There was a need for it. We handle it a little bit differently. We went to all of our customers outside of Dade County and said, okay, your lead time is 1 to 2 weeks. That's what it was last week, that's what it was last month, that's what it was last year. It's not changing. We don't care what happens in Dade County, it's not changing. Went to our Dade County customers and said, we'll build you as much product as we can build you, but we won't compromise our lead time to any of our customers outside of Dade County. So it's a little different than most people did. I mean, just literally truckloads of windows were going into Dade County. A year later, when a lot of that rebuilding was done and those windows were put in place, and we didn't know this would happen. I wish I could say that we were really strategic and we thought this through and we knew what was going to happen in the next 2 years. We didn't. We just believe that you treat your customers fairly, and you know, chips are going to fall where they may, and good things will happen from it. Well, all of a sudden we realized we have just a really dominant market share because all those customers that weren't getting taken care of got taken care of by PGT during that time frame, and we didn't lose customers in Dade County. So everyone looked at our business and said, well, you're going to really drop down. We doubled the year after Dade County, and then we grew about 10% the next year, and then about 15% the year after that, and about 10 to 15% the year after that, and then started going, you know, in the 20% range. So again, sticking to those core values, understanding why that's so important, why the customer is so important, and making sure you always take care of it is really what we stand for. So today, I think you all know where we're at. If you drive up the interstate, you'll see us right there on the side of the road. It's about, I think we have a total of about 590,000 square feet under roof. We do our own glass processing, corporate offices and everything are there. Got some fancy trucks and stuff like that. And we have just an absolutely wonderful group of employees. You know, unfortunately, in 2005, 2006, we had about 2,600 employees. And you know, that's when we were the largest manufacturer in the area, not just in Venice, but in the area. You know, we've been affected by this downturn. I've told the story a number of times. If you look at it, if you measure housing or the construction market by housing starts, we've slowed down 92%. Now, perspective-wise, when you're driving away from here, you know, speed up to about 50 miles an hour. and then slow down to just under 5 miles an hour. That's what happened to our industry. It doesn't feel like you're moving very fast. Even if you're starting and you're only going 5 miles an hour, it feels slow. But if you're going 50 and you slow down to 5, that 90% drop, it's pretty stunning. And there's no manuals. We talk about it a lot. There's no guidelines out there with what you do in an industry that slows down that much. So, you know, we've cut back. You know, we're smaller than we were. We've paid down our debt. We've done all that kind of stuff. So we're pretty proud of what we've been able to do through that downturn. And now we're poised again as things start slowly coming back to really take advantage of that. So what happened over those last 30 years? We started out with that single product, a vertical 4-track window drawn on a napkin, and any product that we introduced from that time forward was really a product that we looked at and our customers talked to us about and said, you need to have this, you need to make this product, you need to provide this service. So we're proud of our products. You know, I think rightly so. We're proud of the products that we manufacture. We're more proud of the way we take care of our customers. And I talk a lot, and, you know, today's kind of a cool day because we're having town meetings. So we're having, you know, 9 or 10 meetings about an hour long at work. We carved out this lunchtime so we could come here, and we're talking to all of our employees about what we do, where we're going, all that kind of stuff. And the one resonating theme I think that comes through is there's a lot of window manufacturers out there. And you know, a lot of you know a bunch of them. You know, the Pellas, the Andersons, the Marvins, you know, the big guys. Almost everyone here came from somewhere up north. You know, there's a few natives, but from somewhere up north. And so you know the big vinyl companies, the big wood companies. You don't necessarily know all the companies in Florida quite as well. But we make windows and doors. We think we make a little bit better window and door than anybody else. You know, I wish I could stand here and say that it's, you know, it's night and day different. It's a window and door. You guys look through it. You know, you see the golf course out back. You see the bay out there. You know, that's what most people do. I look at windows. I'm a weird person. You guys look through windows. I mean, there's a big difference. And it's like the tile guy. You know, I walk in and it's like, wow, that's really cool tile. And the tile guy says, that's really cheap tile. I can't believe they put it in an expensive house like that. I don't know any about it. So I do the same thing with windows. I look at windows. But the thing that makes us so much different is the way we take care of our customers, the feeling that we have about our customers. You can't fake it. I mean, it would be great to have someone walk in and say, oh yeah, I love your customers, I'll always take care of your customers. You find out really quick that you can't fake it. You either love your customers or you don't. And so when we're hiring and we're looking at people, that's really the difference that we bring to the table. So it really is a unique thing that the customer relationship that we have and that we maintain and that we continue to build on is just so critically important. And, you know, we'll talk about it till you're just so tired of hearing us talk about it. But again, that's what makes us so much different. And to me, it's kind of interesting. We had Kevin and Brett came with me today, and they both are responsible for a lot of stuff that happens on the line. And these guys will be, you know, their day ends at a certain time. You know, it's time to punch out. But if the glass isn't done or the windows aren't ready to go, they're going to stay as long as they have to stay because we told the customer that they're going to get their windows tomorrow, and they're not going to leave. They're not going to leave until those customers get their windows tomorrow. So it's a unique thing that we bring to the table that our employees really understand why it's so important. We talk a lot about this. You know, we depend on our employees. We depend on our customers. We love our customers. They do a lot of things for us. We run, you know, we've talked about the different product lines, but when you talk about unique products, we've got, I think, somewhere around 79 or 80 unique products. It's kind of hard, you know, to delineate some of the products because we make different types of single hungs and different types of double hungs and windows that open. But you look at a line that runs through the plant, everything we manufacture is custom made. We don't make a single product and stick it in stock and then pull it out when you want to get it. So we've got that anywhere from 3-day to 2.5 to 3 week lead time, and every single product in those 79 product lines are made to your order. Not made to an order, but to your order. They're unique to your order. So that's really important. It's a logistical nightmare at times, but our folks have done a great job of putting that process in place. It was really cool to stand up here and hear you guys talk about your scholarship program, because it's something it's so important to us and something we've been involved in for a long time. The window and door industry offers scholarships. And they do it through an organization called AMA, that's the American Architectural Manufacturers Association. We're part of that. Some of our employees have won those scholarships. But education is so important. And I know it's a kind of an overused mantra that, you know, hire attitude and train skill. And that's easy to say, but we'll put the data up to back it up. You know, we want to make sure we hire people that have the right attitude. But we've put, you know, I think that number now is probably over 30,000 people that we've put through what we call PGTU. PGTU is accredited. We teach accredited courses. We've had people get college degrees partly through PGTU, partly through outside universities, but making sure that they're getting their college degree because that's important to them. We've had architects, builders, contractors, building officials, you know, everyone in that arena is required to take continuing education courses. We teach those courses. We're accredited to teach those courses. So if you're at PGT, education just becomes a way of life. It's something that's really important. It's something we believe in very strongly. It's something we want to get involved in. We were talking here at the table a little bit about what do you guys volunteer for, and I've got another slide that will talk a little bit about some of the community organizations that we're involved in. To me, there are certain things I think that are really important. You know, we care about kids a lot. We care about education a lot. But I think what's more important is we've got a team of people that care about a lot of different things. And it's really important for our management team to be involved in whatever it is they care most about. I can't make you care about the same things I care about. I wish I could, because I think they're really important. But you might have something that you think is more important than I do, and that's perfectly fine, because it probably is. So I can't make people care about the same things I care about. I can talk about those things and make sure they understand why I care about it. But for us, our management team, our leadership team, it's important that they care about something and they volunteer for whatever that is. Whether it's youth sports, or it's the YMCA, or it's Boys and Girls Club, or it's Loveland. I mean, we've been heavily involved with Loveland for a lot of years. A lot of people in our company. It's just an important thing that we can do. But it's really important that we understand those things that are really important to us, and we're involved in those things. And again, it comes back to that integrity part. You know, you can't just talk about it. You have to just go do it. And sometimes you want to just go do it, and you just kind of want to be quiet about it. You don't want to tell people because that's the right thing to do. You don't do it for the publicity part. We've written a lot of the standards, the impact standard. So we've kind of positioned ourselves. Again, I talked earlier about understanding what's important for the consumer. And when Dade County back in '92 and '93 started shooting 2x4s at windows, it was just crazy. I mean, you're a window manufacturer, you go like, they're going to shoot 2x4s at these windows, and we're supposed to make a window that's going to withstand that? Like these people are, it's Dade County. Dade County does all kinds of crazy stuff. It's not going to fly. But we were the only window and door company that got involved, and we spent, for 2 years, there was a couple of us that spent every Monday in Dade County, working through the code, working on what works, actually running some of those standards, making sure that we understood what it would do. And we kind of came up with the mantra that if a block wall will withstand a 2x4 shot, then the window should withstand it also. And when we did that, it comes back to, is that better for the consumer or not? Well, yeah, we think it's better for the consumer. How do you do that? We don't have a clue how you make a window withstand the same kind of impact that a block wall is going to withstand. But we knew we had a couple years to figure it out. We knew we had some really great employees that were a lot smarter than us, and they were probably going to figure it out. And sure enough, before 1995 came around and that new code went in place, we're the first window company to have an impact window. And then, year fast forward, now it's 2010, 2011, 2012. Well, in 2010, the government talked about having an R5. And an R5 is an insulation rating, but it's a highly insulated window that would be impact. So guess what? Who's the first company that has an R5 impact window in the market? It's PGT. So it's that, again, that's a good thing. It protects the consumer. It's going to keep them safe, and it's going to keep them cool or warm, depending on what climate they're in. It became important for us to do. I've talked about this kind of all the way through. We call it customer intimacy. And back in 1980, back in 1981, we didn't know that term. We knew that it was important to really like our customer and take care of them. But since that time, as we sit through our strategic planning each year, we talk about customer intimacy and what that means. And to us, to try to boil it down as easy as I can, you remember when you first got married? For anyone here that got married and you think that's the most wonderful person in the world, they never do anything wrong, and you wanted to do anything you could for that person, right? Well, hopefully you did, if you're still married. But you think about 20 years later, and 30 years later, and 40 years later, and you know, when you first got married, you knew your wife drank tea, so you made 3 different kinds of tea to make sure you got the right one. Well, 20 years later, you knew your wife drank tea, and you know exactly what kind of tea she drank and how much sugar needed to go in that tea, so you could give her exactly what she wanted, because that was the intimacy that you developed. Well, and then, you know, 10 or 20 years later, it's even more than that. Well, to us, that's what customer intimacy is. Understanding the customer, and if we treat the customer the same this year as we did last year, you know, to be blunt, we're pretty bad. We're really not a customer intimate company. You have to build that intimacy every single year. And we try to be a good corporate citizen. We were talking a little bit about the Shark's Tooth Festival and you know how involved we were with that, and you guys have stepped in and done a lot with the Shark's Tooth Festival as well as other people here. But April is Child Abuse Protection Month. We're going to be heavily involved in that. We're doing some fundraisers, some bake sales. We want to make sure we're taking care of kids really well. I think the environment changes, and you know, I think every year you got to look at what's really important and where can you make a difference. And if you do make a difference, is that something that's important to you, something that's important to your company, something that's important to the employees at your company? You know, kind of the cool thing when you talk about stuff like this, and Barbara talked a little bit about Andrew, or not Andrew, but Charlie, and I just got to kind of talk a little bit about those things. People look at PGT and they'll call me, or you know, at the time maybe call Paul or call Randy when he was there, or call some of our executive leadership and say, you know, tell us the story about what's going on. Tell us the story of how you did this, or why you did this, or how you got this set up. And the story is almost always the same. We didn't do anything except we got out of the way. The campground, I think the only thing we did with the campground is we went over and talked to Jock at the time to make sure that we could use the campground, because nobody was there. And then everything else that happened there was done by 1, 2, or 10 of our employees. Making sure that we had washers and dryers, making sure we had hot food 24 hours a day. Making sure there were bunks and places for people to sleep, you know, just stuff like that we didn't do. We had a truck driver who was, you know, somewhere up in Kentucky, Tennessee, and he knew that there was a storm coming, and it was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. He couldn't get a hold of anyone at PGT, and he goes, you know, there's a storm coming, and I know that everyone's buying plywood in Venice, and there's probably not enough plywood there, and we've got, you know, 2,000 employees that are going to need stuff. He picked up a truckload of plywood and brought it home. Didn't ask any questions, just brought it home. So those are the types of things that our employees do. So when we talk about child protection and Suncoast Foundation, the handicapped and stuff like that, those aren't things that we drive. Those are things our employees come up and say, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it. This is why we think it's important. You know, just give us the green light. Let's make sure that it's okay and that we're not stepping on anyone's toes. And so we do that over and over and over again. So, you know, sometimes you wish you could stand up and say, yeah, aren't we really good? And you know, kind of polish your own badge a little bit. There's no badge to polish. We just have a huge group of really committed employees that love to do stuff like this for the community, and we just got to get out of their way. So, in a nutshell, that's what we do. We're a strong company. We do a lot of testing, a lot of innovation. We've got the best employees in the world, and we have the best customers in the world. And you bring all that stuff together, and it ends up being a lot of fun. And we talked about that when we were sitting up here, that you know, some people don't seem to have fun when they're going to work. You'll find that at times it almost seems like the Three Stooges at our jobs, because we do have a lot of fun, and we do poke a lot of fun at people, and we pick on people a lot, and everyone's liable to get practical joked. We spend a lot of time together. You know, in most cases, we're spending 8 to 10 to 12. You know, if we're not done something, we'll stay there until it gets done so the customer can get the product. So we spend a lot of time together. And when you spend that much time together, you got to have fun, because at the end of the day, you're not taking windows and doors, and you're not taking your checkbook with you. You're taking all those memories and the things that you left, and that's what's really critical to us. So that's what's really important. So with that, I'll just open it up for anything you want to talk about. Questions?
I was just curious on how vertically integrated you are. Do you make your own extrusions? Do you do your own sputtering on glass?
Vertical integration. We vertically integrate in an area for 2 reasons. If it's a competitive advantage for us and we can't really get that product outside, That's really the main driver for us. I say 2 reasons, but that's really the main driver for us. So at this point, we don't extrude our own extrusions, and we don't sputter our own glass because there's a lot of low E out there, but we do all of our own tempering, we do all of our own laminating, because we can turn that. The industry laminates in a week or 2. We laminate in, it takes about 4 hours to run through that cycle, it depends what you do, so we can turn that around really quickly. We do our own injection molding. We have our own tool and die shop, and we have some extremely talented people in tool and die, including making molds. We have mold makers. We do so for our injection molding process. So everything we manufacture, literally we can make the equipment to manufacture it with. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's better to buy that outside because you have experts that do that and they do that for a living. But the capability is there. So we look at everything like that and say, okay, is the source of supply a competitive advantage for us, or do we need to do this ourselves to make it a competitive advantage? And that's where we vertically integrate. It's our own fleet. We want to make sure it's our drivers delivering to our customer, and our customers are asking for specific drivers because they know exactly in the warehouse where they need to put the windows. The customer doesn't have to be there. So it sounds silly, but it's important. Yeah, the back I think was first.
How big is your fleet now?
Oh, you got to ask me that question, and then you're going to go back and check and find out that I'm wrong. I think it's 70. I think it's 75 trailers and about 48 tractors. I may be off by a couple, but it's pretty close. Yeah.
What's your annual revenue?
Annual revenue last year was 165 million. Our annual revenue in our biggest year was 382 million. So that was the downturn in the economy.
I'd like to ask you a question from a historical perspective, because obviously we've been in business quite a while. How would you rate business community Venice over these 30-odd years that you have this organization? Just from the top of your head, how would you rate it? And looking at it today, what would you say it needs to do to improve?
Do I have to answer that while Mayor Hollick's still in the room?
He wants to hear it too.
The business community, not just in Venice, but for us, because we do business all over the state and all over the Southeast, the business community in Florida and Venice, Sarasota County, is much better now than it was a few years ago. I think, we were looking at, anti-growth, and we talked about it in our business that we were actually hauling employees from Arcadia, carpooling them in because we couldn't get employees, we couldn't get training. No one really wanted to listen quite as closely when you talked about the training skills that need to be there, and now there's private industry that does a lot of those things. From a regulation standpoint, it's gotten much better. I think from a business perspective, that's one of the biggest things that affect you. You look at the regulation that you know is there and that you can plan for, and that's okay. I mean, you don't always like everything that's there, but you know. Anything new that comes down the pipe changes the rules. And that's a really tough thing to deal with. If you're looking at, right now we're probably dealing more with federal legislation and understanding how that's changing the rules and the costs associated. Our healthcare costs went up $1 million last year. So, we've talked to our congressman and we've talked to, the key people in DC because our care didn't get better. And you can ask our employees, you can ask them anything you want. I don't think our health care coverage got better. If anything, it might have got a little bit worse, but our costs went up $1 million. So, those types of things I think are kind of frustrating. But I think the business community in general, I think it's tighter. I think we understand each other more. I think if you guys, does everybody here know C.J. Fishman? You got to know and love the guy. C.J. talks about it a lot that, for years, there's kind of been a barrier between North County and South County. That really has to go away, and I think it is going away. I think John's done a great job of helping that go away, and we sat on some boards together and talked about stuff like that. So those are the types of things that are really important. Some of them can't be measured quite as well, but those are really important. I think our leaders have done a good job of doing that.
Is there some way that I can determine how our windows filter the rays that cause fading in furniture and artwork and stuff?
Yeah, you're talking about UV. You're talking about UV transmission. And You could probably talk to that guy right beside you. He might be able to answer that question. If you know what type of glass you have, I mean, we do know the ratings of all the different glasses and how much UV transmission is there. And, you know, laminated glass blocks about 98% of it. But I don't know that I can stand up here and just, you know, quote through all the different types. There's 100 different colors of glass out there. You know, there's probably 20 colors of blue.
Well, there should be a meter that you could use to actually measure that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a meter that does that, but the glass industry has put ratings on all the glass. So, you know, if you know what the glass is, we can tell you.
What are your relationships with the community college system or the state college system here in Venice and Sarasota?
Relationships, question was about the relationships with the college systems here in the area, local area. You know, I think overall it's been extremely well. We've actually had some classes that we've asked SCTI and State College of Florida. I keep saying Manatee Community. It's not Manatee Community anymore. It's State College of Florida. That we've asked them to put in place in their curriculum to make sure that employees are getting the skill sets they need or have the ability to get the skill sets they need from a manufacturing standpoint. We also were heavily involved in North Carolina with a program called Ready to Work. And we ran that. We were the first pilot program that ran through the community colleges where employees would actually learn a set of skills that would make them good manufacturing employees. And there's just a set of, you know, reading and observation and, you know, certain things you got to learn that make you better at doing that. That's come down here also, and we've been pushing for that pretty hard, and the universities are doing a lot of the testing, and so that relationship has been good also. And again, I think, you know, as you look at the economy, I think everybody's looking at what are the things that we need to do to make sure that business can be successful or more successful than they've been, and people are a little more willing now to make sure that that's happening. The foundations have been involved. I mean, that's been a good thing to make sure that training is in place. You know, I think a lot of people have heard of Career Edge. They've done a great job. They just spent a few days in DC talking to Marco Rubio about, you know, making that a national program. So I know they've trained some of our employees and done a great job with that.
You can go 5 miles from this building in 2 directions, and communities are starting to be built, developed. Are you seeing that on a bigger scale, or are we just like?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. This, you know, Lakewood Ranch is one of the success stories in Florida, without a doubt. And, you know, Pat Neal's building there, and Pat Neal's building some stuff down here, and you're seeing a little bit more activity here. You're seeing that in a lot more pockets of things going on and things getting a little bit more positive. There's still some areas that are really depressed and are struggling, but if you look at the overall economic construction picture now compared to a year ago or 2 years ago, a lot more positive, a lot more land out there. Builders have done a great job of getting their land costs under control. And so as they start building, their cost basis is lowered and can be competitive again. So there's still a little bit more work to do there. You know, one of the stats I saw was that in the next 2 years, 60% of the homes will be foreclosed or short sales. And you hear that and, you know, it's kind of a panic thing. To me, it's not necessarily a panic thing. That's good news. That means that is coming out of the market. It's coming out of the inventory. People that are buying that are going to fix them up, put them back into the rental, or flip them over and sell them, and those things will start moving and they'll come out. And once that happens, it's a tough thing to look at the cost of a home and the cost of a new home, and it's frustrating because a lot of us that own our own homes, and you think about some of the low-cost homes that are being built, you know, it's not necessarily the best thing for us. If you live in a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot home that you paid $500,000 for 5 years ago, and Pat Neal's building 1,800, 1,900 square foot home and selling it for $100,000, and it's brand new, you know, we've got to work our way through that stuff. So there's a little bit of work to do, but much more positive now than it has been for a while. Okay. Yeah.
One final, not a question but a comment. You sure could sell me a PGT window right now.
You know, I only touched on one part of your paternalistic company by reading that biography that I presented earlier, but definitely, you're my kind of company. And where in Ohio were you from?
I was from Holmes County, Ohio,
Oh, sure, okay.
Amish community.
Amish country, sure, yes, I'm very familiar with it. We lived in Medina and Akron. We have a little something here. We have a little plaque to present to you. The Venice Area Historical Society honors Rodney Hershberger, CEO of PGT Industries, for providing 30 years of exemplary service and industrial history to the Venice area. And so we'd like to present that to you today. And then I always like to watch the National Press Club, and I'm always amazed they get all these great speakers in, and what do they present them with but that mug? And you know, thought, well, we don't have a mug. We have something even better. We have our great license plate, which says